research, I outlined 3 objectives I'd like to accomplish. The first one was to gain a better understanding of postmodernism, and the second was to prove that our culture is increasingly using visual forms of communication. The third objective was to establish a connection between postmodernism and our increasingly visual culture. As this semester has progressed, I've made a lot of progress in each of these 3 areas. Today I'm going to take you on a guided tour of these 3 objectives, and you'll see where I've come along as well as where large chunks of uncharted territory remain. So, my first objective was to gain a better understanding of postmodernism. In my last update, I defined postmodernism as incredulity towards meta-narratives, or more simply, postmodernism is suspicious of any system of thought that claims to provide a comprehensive picture of the world. Today I'm going to introduce you to 2 postmodern terms that both deal with communication. Deconstruction concerns language, whereas the simulacrum concerns images. Deconstruction is a form of literary criticism founded by Jacques Derrida. The basic premise of deconstruction is that our words have no reference to the objective world. Instead, words are given meaning by their social context and how they relate to each other. When a postmodern author writes, "The man picked up a gun," each individual reader is going to interpret that sentence differently according to his or her own preconceived assumptions about the universe. Now, deconstruction argues that our communication is always garbled by these presuppositions, and that we will never be able to break free of them to see the world as it really is. The simulacrum is a related term applied to visual communication. It's actually originated with the philosopher Plato, who defined it as the identical copy to which no original has ever existed. The simulacrum stands in direct opposition to the traditional idea of an image as a reflection or representation of reality. By contrast, the simulacrum is not a representation of reality at all. The simulacrum is its own distinct universe. It's not related to the objective world. French philosopher Baudrillard writes, "It's no longer a question of imitation, nor of duplication, nor even of parody, but rather of substituting the signs of the real for the real." In other words, under deconstruction, our language is just composed of word signs which do not signify anything outside themselves. And in the simulacrum, our pictures are just composed of image signs which don't represent anything in the objective world. So according to postmodernism, every time we communicate, whether we use words or images, we cannot reach beyond our signs of communication to the reality that we are attempting to convey. My second objective was to prove that our culture is increasingly using visual forms of communication. Author Neil Postman makes a convincing argument for this, and in my last update, I shared with you some of his contentions. In the future, I'd like to supplement his arguments with some research from other authors. In addition to further reading, I'd also like to interview some of the communications faculty on campus. And my third objective was to prove that postmodernism has affected the way we communicate in our culture. Now, I have a confession to make here. At the beginning of my research, I had naively assumed a couple of things. I had supposed, with my minimal knowledge of deconstruction, that Derrida didn't like words, and that he would advocate alternate modes of communication. But in fact, this is not the case. Derrida is not arguing that our words have no value. Instead, he is arguing that their value is limited to a specific social context. At the same time, postmodernism claims that all forms of communication are limited by the same restrictions. Pictures cannot communicate about reality any more than words can. So Derrida is not arguing that we should stop communicating through language. Rather, he is arguing that we need to adjust our expectations concerning the certainty such communication provides. My research has convinced me that if there is a connection between postmodernism and our preferred method of communication, such a connection is unintentional on the part of most postmodern philosophers. Postmodernism has definitely changed the way we communicate, or the definition of communication. What remains to be seen is whether words or images best uphold this new definition. Now, let's see if I can find where I am. I lost my place. This is not me. Here we go. According to the traditional definition of communication, truth exists in the objective world, and our statements are valid if they correspond to that objective reality. Now, words work well with this form of communication. They are able to express the entire range of human ideas, including abstract, moral, and universal terminology. Images, on the other hand, are not good at this kind of communication. A picture can help to illustrate a linguistic concept, but there's no way that a picture can say, by itself, "Thou shalt not lie." That's just not something a picture is able to communicate. So if you want to make a universal statement, you have to use words to do it. On the other hand, postmodernism negates this traditional form of communication by challenging the relationship between the signifier, the word, sign, or gesture by which you attempt to communicate, and the signified, which is the concept you're trying to convey. So, according to postmodernism, communication can only take place between people who share a common network of assumptions. And the information such communication provides does not necessarily have to relate to the objective world. So, in fact, according to postmodernism, there's no way we can test the ultimate veracity of our statements. All we can do is compare them to see if they're consistent with themselves. So, according to postmodernism, images seem to work well with this kind of communication. As we've seen, they are distinct, self-contained statements about, about reality. A picture doesn't necessarily have to relate to an outside context, and they can't make universal statements. Perhaps it's this similarity which has prompted philosopher Frederick Jameson to call postmodernism a cultural form of image addiction. As you've seen, I've made some progress in each of my 3 objectives, but I have a lot more work to do. I'm excited to learn more and to share with you new information as it comes to light.